Whether you're home or away, stay connected to your team with T-Mobile, the network that covers 99% of people in America. They've been investing billions to light up their best network ever. From your backyard to a sold-out stadium, get T-Mobile's best coverage yet. Plus, with T-Mobile, you get a price lock guarantee, so they won't raise the rate of your talk, text, and data, ever. There's never been a better time to switch. Visit your local T-Mobile store today. Coverage not available in some areas. Price lock exclusions like taxes, fees, select promos, and third-party services apply. See T-Mobile.com.
Hey everyone, welcome to The Final Four is Not on the Schedule. I'm your host Eric, alongside with expert analyst Rod. Thanks for joining us on the best MSU basketball podcast featuring an in-depth recruiting, game matchup, and post-game analysis. We dive deep to give you the best tools to enjoy the Spartans and impress your friends and family. Hey everybody, it's Eric alongside Rod. We're here to talk about Michigan State's Senior Day victory over Ohio State, 84-78 at the Breslin Center on Saturday afternoon. Before we begin, I just want to thank all of you who supported the show, either financially or with kind words that you've sent on reviews on your podcast player. Continue to leave those written reviews, 5-star reviews. We appreciate that. If you want to support the show financially, you can go to thefinalfourisontheschedule.com/support. There you can do one-time gifts via PayPal or Venmo, or a monthly contribution through Patreon. And had one of our supporters reach out to us and said, really appreciates it. He said, worth every penny. We really appreciate you, Chad. Thanks so much for those kind words. And I also want to thank all of you who've been supporting me and following me in my free throw challenge. And so I can say that the Final Four is on my schedule. So I managed to win the free throw challenge. It was actually, I don't know did you see it? Was it shown on TV at all, Rod?
I didn't see it.
Okay.
What was the score?
So it was actually 9-8. So
wow.
We tied after the first round, 5-5, and so then they put, I think, just like 10 or 20 seconds. I've got to watch it. I mean, I just got back from Breslin Center. I've had a long, strange day. We'll talk about it in a little bit. But so then I went to overtime, and then had to shoot the second round. I think I hit my first three, and then I hit another one and ended up winning. Because I think they only put like 10, 15 seconds. My mistake is when I first set up, the intern who was next to me insisted on having the rack like a ways away from me. So when I tried to reach, I'd have to go like 2 steps to grab the ball and then shoot. And she was going to like feed me the balls, but it didn't quite work. So anyway, I won. And so I've been practicing a lot. Like it's been my excuse to go to the gym. I feel kind of empty now. Like, I've been going to the gym to practice, and now I'm kind of like, oh, it's sort of like done. I suppose it's like retirement, right?
Right. Well, look, but I mean, the positive end of that is you're going out on top.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it was great. It was, I still can't quite believe I'm going to make it. And the funny thing is we're in the arena and they're announcing, I think they announced today that the Final Four in 2027 is going to be in Detroit. And I can only imagine, like, if I'd won then, I'm like, well, I guess you just take a car ride and don't really need the hotel thing. So anyway, fun day. My son, I think, was more nervous than I was. He'll go to the Final Four with me. And so the show's going to be taking a road trip, and we can only hope that Michigan State is going to follow me to the Final Four.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. Well, congratulations. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
And on a day where everything kind of broke right.
It did. Yeah, it's funny because, because I was pulled out of the stands early to shoot, I go down below, and then just kind of the nature of the day, which is weird. I sort of like, I'll have to admit, I don't remember. I remember most of the game, but there are parts that I miss and parts of the feel for the game. I sort of, at least the game kept me occupied enough that I didn't get really nervous in the first half, thinking about the shooting. And then after the game, thanks to my good friend, Roger Jansen, who kind of set up initial things with Garland, I got to go down on the floor after Senior Day, after all the Senior Day festivities. I met with Madi Sissoko, and I can see, it was actually pretty funny. So he saw me, and I introduced myself. He said, "Oh, I thought you were a lot taller." So, no, it turns out you make everyone look short, but right. Especially me. I can confirm also, though, that I am taller than Stephen Izzo, because my son was kind of questioning that. So I walked by Stephen, like, okay, he is shorter than me for sure. But really good news about the Madi Sissoko and Foundation. They've actually laid the foundation for the school already last week, and so they've started construction of the school.
So they've cleared 50,000 then.
Well, I think they needed 25 to get things going, and so that's my impression. So, I mean, thanks to all of you who contributed. I know you've sent me messages.
That's fantastic.
I mean, you guys are awesome. I mean, with all the other stuff going on, to not forget about these sorts of things too. I mean, it's pretty cool.
That's what I was going to say. And look, it's one of those things. It's obviously, there are a lot of things competing for the attention and the resources for those who have it to give among the Michigan State community, but that was something that I've actually thought about more than once over the time since the horrible events on campus was, just one more thing to add to all of the awful repercussions of that evening would be that, God, I hope Marty's foundation doesn't get forgotten about.
Yeah.
And so that's great news to hear that they've already started with the project. That's fantastic.
Yeah, no, it sounds like they'll be able to complete it. I think there are other things he wants to do. It's almost, in some ways unlimited is sort of the things he wants to do to help out his home country and village and city and stuff. So anyway, they've started on that school. So that I think is going to happen. And so I think that school is going to get built. And thanks so much to all you guys and matching the gifts and everything like that is really tremendous. Other notable things, I got my last ice cream sandwich of the season, so that was kind of nice. I thought that was my reward for winning the challenge. It's also my last time with the heckler, the kind of miserable heckler behind me. I can't tell you how wonderful that's going to be to get a seat reassignment. The chance of him being behind me, I think, is pretty small. And so,
you never know.
Let me live in
the hand of fate is fickle.
There could be another heckler out there, but again,
that's right.
It's not.
It could be worse.
It's not the heckler that bothers me as much as the guy who just seems kind of miserable. It just doesn't seem to enjoy being there in the experience, and so that's the part that will be nice. So, and it was also really nice. We got to go afterwards, and we got down into the locker room. We met Melody Call. We met Jackson Kohler. Let's see. I'm trying to think who else. Carson Cooper briefly. And I talked to Mike Garland for a while. And actually, I asked him.
Good.
I asked him, is it more nervous? Well, you're more nervous, sitting in the stands where you kind of no control over things versus sitting on the bench. And he looked at me and said, "Oh, it's way worse on the bench. Not even close."
Well, that's a rarity. See, I like that. That's not the cliche answer. The cliched answer is always, it's so much worse when you're away from it and you don't have any control. But maybe the difference is that in neither circumstance is he actually on the floor.
Right. You can't control things really. You're just trying to direct.
I guess that could be. Yeah.
Yeah. It was actually funny. We had a little conversation with Billy Call, and he wants to go into coaching. And he was commenting that he doesn't want to coach college because he's like, those guys are, they'll fight you. The teenagers, you can kind of push around a little bit more. They'll do what you tell them to in high school. So I thought it was pretty good. And then I was the one thing I did not expect in the sort of the tour. Went to the weight room and kind of went through the locker room and stuff. It kind of looked like what you'd expect, except one of the things in the locker room, they actually have a barbershop, which I was totally unexpected.
Yeah, I think I knew that.
Yeah. So probably if you've seen a little thing background, backstage tour, probably on TV or something like that. So anyway. Great day. I mean, obviously Michigan State wins, which is the most important thing. Then I get to the Final Four and then all the other things. And so it's been a great day, but it's been busy. And so that's why this show is going out a little bit late because I just had a lot of stuff going on. So anyway, let's talk about the game since, that was why all the stuff centered around. Michigan State defeats Ohio State 84-78 in a game that they controlled early and then just kind of maintained about a 7 to 10 point lead most of the game. Ohio State got down to 3, I think, late in the game. And then Michigan State pushed out to 5 and just kind of stayed basically up 2 possessions or 3 possessions with some clutch free throws at the end by AJ and everyone. And I mean, it's just an overall good performance. I mean, it wasn't great in a defensive sense because they definitely gave up some stuff defensively. But we'll
talk about that.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. But I thought, for a day when emotions are kind of a little bit funny, and I thought Walker was definitely affected by that more than the other players initially. He's definitely settled in after a little bit. The first couple stints, I think he just seemed a little bit out of sorts. So he played. I mean, everyone played really well in general. I think, especially offensively. And I thought, This is another game that AJ played really well in the sense that my feeling was, we talk about how many points he can score and things like that, and that he has not been looking for his points as much. But this is a game where part of his job in this game was to score, was to, break down that pick and roll and to get to the basket and for layups. And so he picked his spots, I think, really well. So I was impressed with his game. He led the team in scoring at 23, but it wasn't like him, hero balling it, going out and getting a lot of points. He was taking what the defense was giving him and forcing him to do. And so, I think I'd start with him as far as game, 7 assists, 1 turnover, a steal, 2 for 3, and then 9 for 11 at the line.
Yeah, I think that you're correct. I think that AJ played another very, very good game. That was it particularly not even just the free throws, but even before that in the second half, it felt like when the game would start to wobble just a little bit, and you're right, Michigan State never really gave them breathing room. When they got as close as 3, that was the closest they got.
Mm-hmm.
But when it would get knocked down to 5 or 6, get in that range where it was just teetering on, well, if they get one more, unproductive possession and Ohio State comes down and scores, this could actually be a game. AJ would seem to steady the ship mostly by going to the rim in the second half. He hit those 2 threes early, which was nice to see. But after that, he played the kind of game that I think you want to see him play. All the points, obviously, which was bolstered a little bit by the free throw shooting at the end, but still a really solid game for him offensively in that way. And then 7 assists to 1 turnover. He did the job and was part of it. And actually his impact wasn't even fully reflected in that number. There were possessions. There was one of Malik Call's threes, I believe, and it was in the first half where AJ was penetrating and made an unbelievable pass in the corner to Joey Hauser, who then swung it to Malik for the 3. It was the best pass I saw him make all day, and he didn't get credited with an assist, obviously.
Yeah, right.
And it was a great pass in the sense that if you remember us talking about, there was that sequence in the previous game, the Nebraska game,
where MSU just kept
moving the ball. Yeah. Right. It was a play, a decision that had that kind of impact. And so because of where the ball went and how quickly it got there, it put Ohio State under immense stress right away. And he was able to swing it to Malik, who was wide open. So, yeah, very, very happy with the way AJ played offensively. Just good stuff. And look, this team, what is it now? 4 straight over 80 and 5 straight over 70, I think.
Yeah.
If you go back to the game in Ann Arbor, they have clearly figured some things out to an extent offensively. Now, I don't want to go crazy because we got to look at the opposition in those games. 2 of those 5 games were against 2 god-awful defensive teams.
Sure.
In Iowa and today, Ohio State.
Mm-hmm.
Nebraska is solid, but not spectacular. Michigan has maybe started to edge up to almost respectable, but they're not very good either. And then I guess Indiana was the other one, which is a legitimately good defensive team.
Yeah.
So you have to consider that when you think about MSU making this run offensively. But I will also say they've played bad defensive teams at other points this season and weren't doing this. Right now, Michigan State's ball movement, their energy, and obviously their shot making, but that is in part a function of the first 2 things, is right where you want to see it. It's this team, by the way, is now over 40% from 3 as a group on the year. So we have now gotten to the point that I think, and I gotta look at the number to remember exactly where the 2016 team finished. But this team is right there with that group. And I always believed they would be a good shooting team, but I didn't think we'd quite get to that level. You've got 4 of their top 6 guys are shooting in excess of 40% from three on the year. That's unreal. I mean, that is just tremendous shooting. And you see it really impact games now because defenses can't key on one or two guys.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
There are times where they got to key on everybody. And if Michigan State has a small ball lineup out there, and then you add in Hogard, who I believe is now just above 30% on the year, I think, or he's right there. You really kind of have to worry about all five. And that's a pretty rare thing. So it's good news for Michigan State. I'd say it's also good news they managed to get 20 of them up today. So it's another game with reasonably good volume. Where they're going to get into trouble is where it's 13, 14 attempts. That's not enough for this team. But lately, for the most part, they're getting the attempt numbers up as well, along with the percentages. So that's really good. And a lot of that I attribute to AJ playing better basketball. To me, it all starts with him.
Yep. I think you're right. And he's actually up to 31% now. So he's
there you go. Okay.
Yeah.
That's not bad.
Which considering he was at like 25, 26% not long ago, that means he's really been hot the last couple
They
games.
pointed out something on the broadcast, which I was not aware of. At home, which isn't going to help him from here on out, but at home, I think they said he was 38%.
Yeah, I believe that.
From three at Breslin. Yeah, it does. When they mentioned, I hadn't thought about it much, but when they mentioned it, just kind of going back over the season, I'm like, yeah, most of the times he's sticking shots, it's anecdotally, it felt like those came at home, So, yeah, it's just been a great performance. And lately, I mean, the last three games, especially, they're at 50% plus in all three of them.
Yeah.
They are on a crazy shooting streak. And two of those came on the road. So you can't even attribute that to, they were comfortable. Iowa and Nebraska were road games. So pretty good stuff from a team that's got to, as we've talked about all year long, has to produce in that area if they're going to be at their best.
They certainly don't feel like streaky threes, that they're making. Like contested threes. I mean, these are ones that are, because of the ball movement, like you mentioned, they're ones that you expect them to knock them down now pretty much, especially like Joey. I mean, who was pretty good.
He's gotten to the point that it's, if he's open like that, it feels like a layup.
Yeah, you're shocked if he misses.
I mean,
right?
He is so dialed in right now. And that's not to take away from other guys. I mean, everybody's dialed in to one extent or another, but especially with him, if a defense can't recover to him and he's wide open, which it's amazing that he's still getting those looks at times, but he is. But again, trust me, that's not a function of defenses not putting him high on the scouting report. They all know. It's just sometimes if the offense is good enough, it's not going to matter. He's going to eventually get, or someone will get a wide open look because of the quality of offense that they're running.
Yeah. There's that trailing three he had in that one where no one picked him up. And there, it may be a little bit of function too of people who are not familiar, who don't play as many minutes. Cause I feel like, there's substitutions or whatever. And that's just, the way it is. But
one of those I recall was on Sensabaugh, and, he plays a lot of minutes obviously, but you're talking about a freshman, and you're also talking about a freshman who doesn't defend very well.
Yeah.
So those kind of mistakes are going to happen in that situation,
Yep. So Joey had a quiet 6 for 7 day, 3 for 3 from the three, 1 for 2 from the line, 6 rebounds, 2 assists and a turnover for 16 points. Then also you have Tyson Walker, one of the other seniors, 7 for 15 for the floor. He struggled from threes, only 1 for 4 for him. 3 rebounds, 6 assists, no turnovers, 15 points. He was, again, there's a little stretch. There are definitely little stretches in the game where he just is like unstoppable. And those, he did it again. And defensively, it was interesting. I feel like defensively, his approach in the second half was something Michigan State doesn't do very often. They were pressuring all the way from almost full court press and or at least, harassing the ball handler all the way up the court for a while. Does it slow him down, or he got one steal.
He got into Thornton, and frankly, that's not a bad idea against Ohio State because again, this is a young, or even if they're not young, when you're talking about those grad transfers, this is still a group that doesn't have a lot of collective basketball, but in Thornton's case, under their belts. But in Thornton's case, you're talking about a true freshman, and yeah, it was Tyson did some nice things defensively, individually. I would agree with you, and I think that's something, he's capable, obviously, of doing that. He's one of those players that can get very, very aggressive and not be gambling. He has the defensive intelligence and the physical tools, the quickness, and to some extent the strength too, to be able to do that and not necessarily pay a price for it. Whereas a lot of guys can't get away with that.
Next, we'll talk about Malik Hall. He was 4 for 8, 2 for 3, 4 from the 3-point line. He had 3 rebounds on offensive board and a block for 10 points. And I thought played a pretty good game.
Yeah, again, I mean, offensively, Malik has. I thought when he first came back, the jumper seemed to be lagging a little bit, and that has definitely recovered in recent games to the point that he's going to finish the regular season above 40% from 3, which is, definitely the mark of a capable shooter. And, what you like is it's the same thing with all these guys. You talked about they're not taking contested shots. With Malik, it's really just waiting, picking his spots, waiting for those opportunities where the ball finds him as opposed to somebody else for open looks, and he's hitting them. But yeah, so apparently, as I said, he was suffering from some back spasms during the game today. I would assume that's not anything of grave concern. But there were some moments where there was one where he was called for a foul on Sensabaugh on the baseline, where, it was a foul, but Sensabaugh was very physical in the play too. And he kind of came up from that one. I don't know if that was where it happened. But that's where I started noticing that he was kind of favoring something a little bit, but then he continued to play. But it was great that, again, all these guys that were veterans, and we may or may not see it. We don't know yet whether this was their last game. I will say this, and this means next to nothing, so please take it as such. But I don't know how you felt, but watching the guys coming out of the game, in both Malik and Tyson's cases, it didn't look like the typical farewells to me. So, for the nothing that's worth. but anyway, solid offensive game from him.
Jaden Akins continues to hit double digits offensively. He is 4-7 from the field, 3 for 4 from 3. Again, just really shooting well. 3 rebounds, finished with 13 points. And defensively, it did pretty well too, I think.
He's another one of these guys that when he takes a shot, you expect to see him hit it. I thought he did some really nice things early. What I liked was, he hit a 3, and then the next possession, or I think it was the next possession, or maybe shortly thereafter, they got the ball to him kind of in quasi transition. And instead of settling for the jumper, he pump faked and took the ball closer to the rim, hit it, and got fouled. Very athletic play, very aggressive play offensively. That's the mix that you want to see out of Jaden Akins. And I think once, but I will say this, the one criticism I would have of him today, and it was not the first time we've seen it this season. There was a possession late where MSU was trying to, run clock.
Oh yeah, right.
When they've got the ball.
Mm-hmm.
And very early in the shot clock, he took a very ill-advised turnaround long 2-point jumper. I mean, it was bad in every sense you could evaluate it, and he missed. That's the last piece of the puzzle. I talked about this on the Spartan Mag board earlier this week, and I think that play was an example of what I'm talking about. It's not the only one, but it's a perfectly good one to illustrate the point. Jaden Akins, especially in, say, the last 3 weeks, has clearly demonstrated why Tom Izzo and his staff were so high on him coming into this season before the foot injuries kind of derailed his progress a little bit. But this is what we've been seeing is why they were convinced that he might be their best player. You know, we've seen plenty of evidence of it. Both ends of the court. You mentioned that he chips in with wing rebounding as well. I mean, he is a guy who is capable of contributing in every single area of the game. You know, and there's not a lot of guys who can do that. I think the last remaining step for him to become great is judgment. It's a play like the shot I was just talking about,
right.
Or it's times where he decides to penetrate, but he's not properly evaluating things in the sense of, one, whether a lane is really available for him, or two, giving himself, by virtue of how he's doing it, the opportunity to maybe dish to a teammate, to keep his dribble alive and pull it back out, which is something you see. That's something you see AJ Hoggard do much, much more now.
Yep.
You'll see it where he'll look to penetrate. It's not there, but he's kept his dribble alive, so he's able to back it out, start over again. Those are the kinds of, it's judgment stuff. And that only, you know, you can't, if you don't have that intuitively, some guys do. You know, Magic Johnson didn't need a lot of time at the college level to figure that stuff out. But most guys, it's going to come via experience. And, you know, Jaden is getting that right now. And I think that it's fair to assume that, you know, we assume he'll be back next year. And assuming he is back, I think that's the breakthrough. That's the last step that needs to come. I think it probably does come. And if it comes, then you're talking about somebody who's good enough that he could be in the mix for Big Ten Player of the Year. I mean, that might sound crazy for a guy who I don't think is quite averaging double digits just yet. He's right on the cusp of it. But I think if you've watched him the last 3 weeks, you understand what I'm talking about.
Oh, sure.
I mean, the talent level and the ceiling is just immense.
And I feel like in some respects, you almost watch Malik and you're like, this guy's like about 2 weeks behind or 3 weeks behind Akins and sort of recovering from that foot injury. You know, that, you know, he's going to be more than he is in a couple, you know, how long you extend the season is really going to be the key, I think, for those two players.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Mady Sissoko will be the last one probably to talk about. He did not start this game because it was senior day. They started Jason Whitens instead, but Mady had 22 minutes. He's 1 for 2 from the field, split his free throws, 2 for 4, 7 rebounds, 3 of them offensive, had a block, finished with 4 points. I thought he played a really good game. And I think you really see, you know, so much, you just definitely see a huge difference between him and Kohler. I mean, I like Kohler as a player a lot, but the difference in the screening, especially in the pick and roll with AJ, is totally different. I mean, it's so much better with Sissoko, I think, out there.
It is, although I think it's improving with Jackson.
Yeah,
I think he's improving there as well. But I would agree with you. Right now, Mady is the best screener they've got. And it does impact the offense that they're able to run. I will say this, and I tweeted this during the game. One thing I did not understand from Michigan State today, and look, I'm sure he's got his reasons. He knows far better than I do, but just watching the game, I struggled with. And we talked about this some in our preview. You know, Ohio State with Key out of the lineup is really caught in a tough spot when you're talking about size. If you look at this team right now, they have Okpara, who starts, who's obviously a legit big man. But after that, they don't have any size. So they had Eugene Brown playing the 5. They had Roddy Gale playing some 5. I mean, we're talking about wings, who were playing the 5. And I didn't understand why Michigan State didn't match it very much. I thought it contributed some, not the entirety of it, but I thought it contributed some to the defensive problems they had, because you were really putting mostly Mady because he played more, but also Jackson and even Carson Cooper. The 3-minute stint he played was not against Okpara. It was against, I think it was against Eugene Brown.
Yeah.
You're putting those guys in a very difficult position defensively to have to guard guards, you know? And Michigan State, what I think it was, I think Michigan State's rotations in this one were weird. And in part, it's because of it might seem a small thing, but the way they started the game with both Hall and Hauser out there together,
Yeah.
I think may have impacted it some in terms of how the rotations went. And so they struggled to get back to it. They eventually did go small, but I was bothered by that. I have to tell you, I didn't quite understand it, and I felt badly for all of those fives on the MSU roster because I thought for a lot of that game they were being put in a very difficult position, and that had something to do with why they struggled.
Yeah, and I think there were a number of times, and maybe you could see it on TV. I'm not sure, but there were a number of times that Mahdi was, had a wide open, to the lane down to the basket off the pick and roll screen. But I just don't think AJ trusts him, and maybe for good reason, maybe and then there wasn't that the opening for Kohler when he was out there, and the doubles come quick on Kohler now too, and so he's still a little bit slow recognizing it's coming to feel it and get rid of it or make a quick move.
I'm also disappointed by the fact that, particularly with Jackson was in there, and he had some minutes against Oak Park, but he also had some minutes against their small ball lineup. I was disappointed Michigan State wasn't able to make anything of that offensively too.
Yeah.
I didn't think in any way you can talk about it. I didn't think they did their fives any favors today.
Yeah. And the only thing of note that we didn't really talk about prior to the game is fast break points. Michigan State got a lot done.
Oh, yeah.
23-9. And at some point it's like 17-2, but they got a lot of work done in the break. And so that was, that was very impressive.
No question. It was funny on the broadcast. It's always amusing to me to see guys betray how little they've actually seen or been aware of Michigan State, because the play-by-play guy was talking about how, Michigan State even seems to be running off makes for Ohio State, and Robbie Hummel was doing the color, and he said, that's vintage Michigan State. He said, every time I ever played them that we knew coming in, he said he nailed it, of course, because he's smart and he pays attention. He said, they haven't been doing that with this team very much, but against Ohio State, they were. It was interesting. We had it on our keys for the game in Columbus, and then it didn't really happen so much. And it hasn't happened with much frequency at all this year at any time. And so I took it off the keys, but boy, it was one today.
Yeah,
it absolutely was. Michigan State ran with a real purpose. And look, we talk about this every year, although usually we've got more reason than this team has given us to think it will actually happen. But when you get into these NCAA tournament games and you're facing teams, unlike the Big Ten, that don't scout you, don't see you every year, we're oftentimes expecting that Michigan State will be able to play much more freely, much more 94-foot game in the tournament than they do during the regular season, just because teams are caught by surprise. They're not used to seeing it. If this team can add that, if they can run like this or anything close to this in the NCAA tournament, that's a big additional tool in the kit, because it is not something they've done with any consistency at all. And you can make a pretty good argument. I don't know if this was the most fast break points, or we talk all the time about how dubious a stat that is anyway, the way however it's evaluated on a game-to-game basis. But this is one where I felt it matched my perception.
Yep.
Like 23 points sounds about right. They ran a lot and with great efficiency. So if they can get anywhere close to that going forward, that's a huge element offensively that this team just has not had. One of the reasons we talk about three-point shooting being so important for MSU is that they don't get consistent scoring really a lot of other ways. This is not a team with legit post-up threats or consistent ones. They haven't been a transition team. So where else are they going to score? Well, a lot of it's got to come from three, but if you're adding transition into the mix, okay, now we've got some different things that allow you to score in a wider variety of ways. And that's also important because it could potentially help you withstand an off shooting day.
Sure.
You know, you hate, I mean, right now, this MSU team, you love the way they're shooting, but you don't want to hang your hat on it entirely. You know, I talked about at the outset that this team might actually be starting to threaten the overall numbers that the 2016 team had as a 3-point shooting team. But there was a big difference between that team and this team in every other way. That team was also very good in transition. That team didn't have a dominant low post player, but Matt Costello was more reliable than anybody on this year's MSU roster. They had and so was Deontay Davis for that matter. So they actually had a low post game too. That team had a variety of ways to attack you. This team to date hasn't shown that, but if the transition game is going to be there, well, okay, now we're starting to get into interesting territory.
Absolutely. Especially when you think about, you've got Joey, who's a trailing 3-person, and now you have wings that are shooting like, Hall and Akins. Yikes. I mean, there's a lot of damage from everywhere. Both, so why don't we break for our keys to the game briefly? Before then, I just want to remind you, if you're sponsor, one way to support the show is to support our sponsors, our great sponsors, like Brothers That Just Do Gutters out on the west side of the state in the Grand Rapids area. If you have gutter problems like I did, make sure you have these guys come check it out. Kurt Stauffer and his team are very professional. They get things done quickly, efficiently. They are fully insured. You get 10% off your order if you say Final Four to Kurt. You can email him at kurt.stauffer@brothersgutters.com. You can find that on the show notes just beneath the podcast player there for the episode. They can get cleaning for gutters if you got leaf problems, or if you're like me and had actually had a tree growing in your gutter. You can also get new installation. They can repair gutters, add leaf guards, whatever you need. They'll do it all. And so absolutely check out Kurt and his team. They're in the Grand Rapids area, all the way out to Lakeshore, Holland, down to Saugatuck, up until Rockford, and out as far east as Lowell. They'll hook you up and take good care of you. Also, our friends at Nudge Printing, Gabe and Brittany are MSU alums. They've been instrumental in getting the Spartan Strong shirts put out. They've, I think, done over 15,000 last I talked to him. So they're helping raise money for the shooting victims and the other students who need help and services through the Spartan Strong Foundation, or Fund, I think it's called. So you can get your Spartan Strong shirts there. You can also get any other sort of Spartan gear, including our gear for our show. If you want to find out that, you can just go to the Final Four on the schedule.com/merchandise. And there you can find our shirts and hoodies, like the hoodie that I wore today, which is very light and comfortable. And, hey, maybe you'll be a free throw champion if you wear our hoodie. So you can get other shirts and stuff through them, not just Michigan State stuff. So if you've got a house divided, you've got someone who went to Central or maybe Western, you can get stuff there, or even some other schools around the country too. So you can check out their stuff, their whole collection at nudgeprinting.com. 20% off your order at checkout if you enter in the code Final4. So let's go through the keys of the game, brought to you by Nudge Printing, in just a moment.
The midway point of the NBA season is here, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scorers and threes drained. I love mixing it up by betting against the spread, taking the over on Giannis's points every chance I get, and more exclusive bets like the 2x3, 2 threes scored in the first 3 minutes. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine bets like those for a chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/BlueWire. That's FanDuel.com/BlueWire to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. 21 plus in select states. First online real money wager only. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable free bets that expires in 14 days. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit fanduel.com/RG in New Jersey.
What's up, everybody? It's Kate and Michelle from Draft Queens, the podcast making sports and fantasy football more awesome for everybody. We're
We're coming to you weekly with NFL start-sit advice, breakdowns of the hottest sports headlines, and maybe even a few friendly sports bets.
So go on, follow Draft Queens now wherever you listen to podcasts as part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network.
So the first key of the game are the threes. Michigan State shot 60% from three, 12 of 20. So it was, as you always talk about, it's not just the percentage, but it's also the volume. And they got both of those today. Yep. And so, I mean, check, right? And, I would say the one thing, though, Ohio State got some stuff done at the three, which is probably a little more than we expected. They took 25 and hit 11. So they kept pace. I mean, it took them a few more shots, but they got a lot done on the three as well.
Yeah, I mean, only a one shot difference in terms of makes. Ohio State not quite as efficient, but you can't complain offensively about what Michigan State did. I mean, it was a repeat of what we've been seeing in all these games. Like, you start with AJ Hogard getting himself into positions where good ball movement after what he does is going to result in an open shot. That's just the bottom line. And they're running good stuff too. Good screening game, as you mentioned, with Mahdi. It's all clicking right now. And, obviously you can have a game where you're getting high caliber shots and they just don't fall. That happens. But right now, even if the percentages were not what they were, I would be happy with what Michigan State is getting from there, because they're getting great looks. And that's, at the end of the day, that's the thing I think you need to see to evaluate whether an offense is being effective or not, is the quality of the shot. And they are getting a very high quality look these days. Defensively, I mentioned that I had a problem with how often Michigan State didn't look to counter Ohio State's small ball lineups. And I think that was not the only problem, but it was part of the problem in terms of limiting Ohio State from three themselves. Because here's the thing, Ohio State was getting good looks. They weren't hitting like highly. I shouldn't say that. There were some contested shots, but the vast majority of them were, in my opinion, pretty high quality looks.
Yeah, I agree.
For Ohio State. And so that's a problem. And for as much as we can be happy about how the offense seems to have hit another gear recently, we also need to recognize that Michigan State is not playing the same caliber of defense they had been. And today was another example of that. I didn't think they handled pick and roll very well. And I put a lot of it on the guards. I thought the fives were okay when they were in the game. They did their job in hedging. But I didn't like the way the guards played very much. So that's a concern. Now, Izzo seems to be, from what I've gathered, of the opinion that this is something they believe they can get corrected. Like, I think he would rather have this dynamic the way it is right now than what it was for a lot of the season, where the defense was there consistently, but offensively they were just really struggling to ever get into a rhythm. They'd go through those long droughts in every game where they couldn't get anything done. I think he'd rather, with this team, be facing what he's got currently, because I think he believes that they're not that far away defensively. They'll get it figured out, but they're going to have to get it figured out.
Yep. Because
this to me is not what they've been doing defensively of late, is not winning basketball.
Yep, I agree.
Not for where they're going.
Yeah, well, when you're in a one and done situation, you got to be able to have that.
Yeah,
be able to rely on that to get stops, because you can't always outscore everyone.
That's right.
Puts a lot of pressure on your shooting.
A day where absolutely. If you're, if your whole thing is, if we shoot well, we can beat anybody. That's not Michigan State basketball. Michigan State basketball is, if we're hot from three, we can beat you. If we're not hot from three, we'll score in transition, or we'll score in post-ups, or we'll just lock you up defensively, or we'll get second chances. Well, a lot of these things that we're used to being able to count on as other answers when the shots aren't falling haven't been present very often for this team. So that's the concern. they're not going to develop a great low post game between now and the end of the year, you know.
Right.
Today notwithstanding, I'm still not convinced this is going to be a team that you can count on doing a ton of damage in transition. I will happily be proven wrong, but I'm not counting on that. But the one other card they should have to play is, hey, if shots aren't falling for us, we're good enough defensively that we could shut your water off too, and then it becomes a grind out game, you know, but at least we're in it. That should be within their capability, but we need to actually see it.
Yep. So the second key to the game is defensive glass. And so Michigan State has been the on again, off again. Ohio State punished them in the offensive glass, which didn't really matter in Columbus. Here, they had 7 offensive rebounds for a 23% offensive rebound rate, which is good. And Michigan State actually had 25% of their missed shots they rebounded. So, and overall, they out-rebounded Ohio State 29 to... Oh, actually, it was a tie, I guess, 29 to 29.
Yeah, it felt a lot worse than that. When I saw that number, I was actually surprised it was that low, only 7. But I think I know why it felt worse.
They're the end of the
if
game.
you look at the second, the number of them came at the end, and you started having flashbacks to some unpleasant memories of recent vintage.
Yep.
But the other thing is, second chance points went 11-2 in Ohio State's favor.
Yeah.
So Ohio State really cashed in on the limited number of offensive rebounds they had. To score 11 points on 7 offensive boards, that's a really good clip. And so that was damaging. I was prepared to say, boy, it's more of this on again, off again stuff. I don't think you can fairly evaluate Michigan State's performance today there as a bad one, but it just didn't feel good to me either. And again, when Ohio State spent a lot of that game small balling, it makes it even a little worse. You know, some of those lineups they had out there, that stuff shouldn't happen. Where those guys are getting offensive rebounds, especially if you say, well, Michigan State's actually playing legitimate 5s. If they're not going to play an optimal lineup to switch 1 through 5 on defense, and they damn well better get something out of it on the glass.
Sure. Yeah.
And it just felt like at big moments they didn't. But I can't grade it a failure when you look at the bottom line numbers.
Well, and it's always extra painful late in the game when you give up an offensive rebound off a free throw. I mean, that just seems.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Another one of those. That's getting old fast. Yep.
And again, I don't. How many games in a row though is this that they've had a lane violation on free throw? I mean,
like that was one that cost them.
Yeah.
And I believe me, at the time it happened, Michigan State might have even a double-digit lead or close to it.
Yep.
But I remember flashing on the thought, boy, if this thing tightens up, you just gifted them a point, and you never know how much that's going to matter.
So the third key to the game was points in the paint, and points in the paint were 24 for Ohio State, 24 for Michigan State. So a push.
Yeah, and maybe disappointing that Ohio State was able to get that much, because let's remember, their best low post player doesn't play, Zed Key. And then we talked about Ohio State not being a team that tends to get a lot done in terms of penetration either. So that's a higher number than you would have wanted to see from them. On the flip side, though, I thought Michigan State did a reasonably good job of mostly via getting the ball to the rim off the dribble, as opposed to post-ups. That was encouraging to see, but definitely not a decisive edge for MSU. And, I had a feeling that in this game, they might have an opportunity to do that. And they just weren't. I mentioned how disappointed I was when Kohler was out there, the one guy above their 5s that you feel all right with getting post touches on offense, and they just didn't take advantage.
They did a really good job, they being Ohio State, of swarming him as soon as he got a touch inside, though.
They did.
So that forcing him
to
get rid of it.
They did, but there were also, another problem Michigan State had, and you may or may not have been able to see it at the game, but, there were maybe 3 occasions that an MSU big man had the ball right around the rim and got stripped.
Yeah.
And in all of those occasions, part of the problem was they'd either catch the pass or get an offensive rebound and then bring it down And that's a cardinal sin for a big man. If you get the ball high, keep it high.
Right.
When you bring it down to your waist, you give small players, anybody, but especially smaller players, an opportunity to strip you. And that's exactly what happened. And it happened more than once.
The fourth key to the game was AJ, and we talked about him plenty. He was really good. So I almost think at this point you can say whatever it was is going on before. Not only has he gotten over that, but he's elevated his game and I think just to your point earlier that he is dictating the pace of the game a little bit like, we're used to seeing Michigan State point guards do. And, that's very encouraging to see, obviously, because we still have some basketball to play, hopefully.
Yeah, I would agree with that. The offensive improvement is right where you'd want to see it. Now, defensively, he's one of these guys, and there were several of them. It's not any one guy, but he's in that group. Needs to find a way to get his level back up because I don't think he's as sharp. Once again today, they didn't handle pick and roll very well, which led to some 3-point opportunities, I believe. But there were also multiple occasions where Michigan State perimeter defenders just gave up an angle. Very disappointing. And I'm not sure why those mistakes are happening at this stage of the season. They really shouldn't be. But he was one of those guys. He had a moment or two where that happened. He wasn't alone in it, but that's the thing you want to see is AJ do all the things he's doing offensively right now, but also get back to being a consistent possession to possession defender.
And finally, the fifth key to the game was Senior Day. Michigan State has now won 11 straight Senior Day games.
Yeah.
And then interesting, well, maybe not that interesting, but Tyson Walker, the crowd was chanting one more year after he did his little talk in the celebration. And then Izzo actually encouraged him to say it, to give the chant one more time. So it was kind of funny that he did that after the game too.
I saw the clip. Yeah, he said that the line specifically was something like, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he made it a point to not talk to those guys about it before now, and because he doesn't want to put any additional pressure on them. But he said, well, but they're still in my house for this game, so hell with it.
Yeah.
And he got the crowd to pick up the one more year chant for both of them. They seem to enjoy it from what I could tell.
Yep. There's no surefire way to get Izzo to talk a long time than for him to begin by saying, I'm going to keep this short. And he talked for quite a while.
That was I'll tell you what, though, I saw a clip of it, and these things are always good every year, but I really liked his performance today. I think the way that he addressed, all the things that have hit the campus, the MSU community, et cetera. I think it was the right kind of note without being maudlin.
Yep.
I think he's really good in these situations. And we're just, you just better understand you're never going to have somebody like this. You could have a good basketball coach again. I sure as hell hope that happens. But, just watch. I mean, I could name names, watch how a Nate Oates has been.
I think that's a good example. That's a great
lately,
example.
And it's just, you're not going to get this again, people. So enjoy it while it lasts.
Yeah. And I think, I think it's very fair criticism for Izzo to say he's not like a wordsmith. He doesn't always exactly say the right things. He, but he seems to capture the tone that needs to be captured at that time. And, maybe he doesn't say it the most eloquently, but you see someone like Nate Oates. I mean, that guy's like tone deaf, and with this whole situation, Brandon Miller. And I think that's a good contrast of a guy, these guys are just kind of jocks too in some of them, right? So they don't necessarily have all these skills. And so it's nice that he does have that.
And I think the biggest thing I would say is that Tom Izzo is so of the fabric at Michigan State that there's never a doubt in my mind that he's accurately reflecting what it means to be a part of this community, of Michigan State. And this is another thing, another reason why I say enjoy it, because you're not going to see this again. He's at, I don't know what it is now, 36 years, 37 years,
Probably,
something like
yeah.
that.
Mm-hmm.
When you add in his time as an assistant to his head coaching run, that alone, I'm not going to see it again in my lifetime. I know that I'm not going to live long enough, most likely. I'd love to be wrong about that, but I don't think so. And I suspect even if you lived for another century, you're not going to see that again. That's just not the nature of the sport anymore for guys to have that long a run, right?
Yeah.
And part of the reason he's able to accurately to get the tone right, to capture the mood of Michigan State so well is he's been here forever. You know, most of these guys, they're at a place, if they're lucky, and if you're lucky, they're at your school, a decade.
Right.
That's a long run in the modern game, a decade. That doesn't happen very often. So those kind of scenarios, how can Izzo had basically been at Michigan State around a decade before he ever coached a game as a head coach. So he knew the place intimately before he ever started as the head coach. So you think about that.
Right.
Like we keep saying, enjoy this while it lasts, because you're not going to have senior days like this. It'll be different.
Yep, it'll be
Doesn't
different.
mean it can't still be good, but it's going to be different.
Be different. Yeah, I mean, if you think about how many football coaches Michigan State's had since he's been even head coach. I mean, I don't know.
Well,
5 or so?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah.
And that's just head coach.
Saban Williams, yeah. John L. Smith, D'Antonio, Mel Tucker. 5. Yep.
And that's pretty typical. And what he's,
and those are some guys with, Mark D'Antonio had a long run.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
But that's an example of what I'm talking about. So Mark D'Antonio has a long run, and it was, 12 years?
That sounds about right. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
probably.
But I want to say like 07 to 19.
Sure.
Something like that. And he had been an assistant here before too. So he was another guy who understood the culture. And I think in a little different way than Izzo, but I think Mark D'Antonio also got Michigan State in a way that not everybody who's been in those jobs has. But Tom Izzo is way beyond that, because he's been at Michigan State way longer than even Mark D'Antonio. So it's hard to get these situations. It almost never happens.
Right. Yeah, it's a unique thing, right? And I'm sure it's like, Boeheim at Syracuse or Coach K at Duke. It's just these guys who've been there for so long, you don't even remember what it was like before, because people have gone to school, graduated, they've gone into their professional careers, and he's been the same coach the whole time, and since their formative.
Well, I don't
years.
remember Syracuse without Boeheim. I do remember them before K. I remember Bill Foster's team that went to the Final Four. In what was it, 78, I guess. But not well. It's and I've been paying attention for a long time. So yeah, these guys are fading out, and you're not, when you look at all the different elements here, the money, the stress on the jobs, the changes to the college game that maybe make it less attractive to guys to stay in it forever. A lot of these different things. It just seems very, very unlikely.
Yeah. Well, and the key, of course, the number one reason is that you just have to maintain that level of consistency and success. Because if you're not successful, eventually you're going to find your way. You're going to find the exit door.
That too. Yeah. I mean, look at a guy like John Calipari. Now he's managed to turn it around, but that's a guy who's done a lot of winning, and it is very much a "what have you done for me lately" world.
We see it on the Spartan Mag board all the time, right? These guys
absolutely
washed up, should have done this, that, or the other thing. And
Izzo's washed. Yeah. I'll tell you what, though, one part of me does welcome that stuff, because I figure whether it's from elements of our own fan base or fan base of the other Big Ten school in the state, I welcome it, because there are so many times in the past 25 years I could go back to and remember when other idiots said the same thing, and how that just kind of was just prior to a Final Four run. or a Big Ten title. So it's comforting to me in a way to see that, because I figure, well, that's as sure an indicator as anything that the next big success is right around the corner.
There's definitely a shortage of crows on the bread cedar, right?
Yeah.
There's been a lot of crows eaten by a lot of people, doubters through the years. Michigan State was a 6-point favorite per KenPom, and guess what? It's exactly 6 points. So analytics win there today. Michigan State with their
He knows
victory.
what he's doing.
Yeah, well, yeah, it must be. In Michigan State with the victory, I believe is guaranteed anywhere between a 3 and a 6 seed in the Big Ten tournament now, because of all the they can't have a tie, so it just depends on how things shake out tomorrow. And my guess, I haven't seen the percentages. My guess is they're probably about a 40% chance of getting a double bye going into.
I saw a number this morning
before the game.
I think had it a little lower.
Well,
right.
but that was before the win.
Right.
Now they had the win. I think it's probably about 40%.
Yeah, you might well be right. Look, here's the thing, and I'm not first to this by any means, but it's worth noting, since we're talking about it, for all the complaining about, the Minnesota game cost us. Okay, would they be in a better position for the bye? Which doesn't mean a whole hell of a lot to me, but whatever. You'd like to have it if you can get it, I guess. Yeah, they would be in a better position if they played, and assuming they beat Minnesota at home. But they're still not in a bad spot, because when I look at the games that have to fall their way, everybody Michigan State's rooting for to win is at home. In a couple of these instances, Rutgers hosting Northwestern and Penn State hosting Maryland, you're talking about the home team really, really needing a win.
Right. Yeah. Highly motivated.
Those teams, Penn State is showing up, best as I can tell, more often than not, when you look at brackets that are out there by people who are at least somewhat reputable, they seem to, at the moment, be just on the right side of the bubble, but just. So Penn State would be very well advised to get that win tomorrow. Rutgers is not quite there, but they're getting close.
Yeah, they're
to
teetering.
being that in or out. They really could use a win. And, in both of those cases, even though they're home games, they're facing teams that have pretty good profiles themselves. Again, Rutgers hosting Northwestern, and Penn State hosting Maryland. So to beat that caliber of team also helps your case. So those teams should have as much motivation as you'll ever find to perform well. And then you've got, I believe they need
Indiana.
They need Indiana to beat Michigan.
And that seems reeling after losing to Iowa at home by getting embarrassed. So you think they're going to, for senior day, they're going to be upset.
You would think Indiana will be jacked. And I believe Indiana's got their own double bye considerations.
Correct.
In play potentially, right?
Both teams, actually. Whoever wins, I think, gets a double bye.
Right. Yeah. And for Michigan, Michigan is in desperate. They've got to have that win. If they don't get that win, they probably I don't know how they'd get a bid unless they got to the Big Ten final. But Indiana, again, supreme motivation, and they're at home, and you would expect a good performance from them. And then lastly, I guess the one that's shakiest would be Purdue hosting Illinois. And I only say that because you would look at it initially and say, well, Purdue's wrapped up the Big Ten regular season title. They don't have any Big Ten tournament seeding to worry about, but Purdue is very much in the discussion for a 1 seed in the tournament that really matters.
Correct.
And so again, if you're them, you don't want to take a home court loss.
And it's senior day
to
too,
anybody.
right?
And it's senior day, right? And they don't have a ton of seniors, but still, you would expect that. So all these games, you would think Michigan State's in pretty good shape. I saw something today, and I didn't double check it with Vegas, but I believe Rutgers is actually a slight underdog against Northwestern at home, which you wouldn't have. Maybe it was Penn State. You know what? It might be Penn State hosting Maryland. I may be wrong about that. That would actually make more sense. But still, you have to feel pretty good if you're a Michigan State fan. I saw Izzo's post game. He was talking about how he's going to spend his Sunday like the rest of us, just watching all these games and rooting for the home teams. And but it does shape up as an interesting Sunday. And this is the other thing I was thinking about too. And I haven't gone back over the schedules to see how much this impression actually tracks with reality. But I was struck by today the fact that Michigan State isn't playing on the Sunday that ends the regular season, because it just seems to me like frequently we've had that equation where they're playing on the Sunday to end the regular season. Yep. And then they're oftentimes playing on the Sunday because they've gotten to the Big Ten tournament final. That doesn't happen every year, but it happens a lot. Not the case, at least with the regular season this year. It was the only Big Ten game today. And then tomorrow there's just a slew of them, but they're almost all have, some level of implication for the participants involved and some implications for Michigan State.
Yeah, I think the most unlikely scenario is where they get a 3 seed if Iowa loses at home to Nebraska, and then all the other things that we talked about fall. But I mean,
that's the one you just, you look at it, and that's the one that seems least likely by far. But yet the Big Ten, the way it's been this year, wouldn't it be something if Iowa at home just can't throw the ball in the ocean and Tominaga gets red hot and Nebraska pulls it off? I mean, I'm not counting on it, but the way this season has gone, you can't rule it out.
Yep, I totally agree. All right, well, I think we'll wrap it up there. I'll try and get this out. I know it's been a little bit late, and so we're talking all about all this stuff, and entirely possible by the time you listen to this, all this has transpired. So a couple programming notes. We are going to have Dom Leese from bracketometry.com. He's going to come back on the show Monday, and so we'll probably have that Monday. We'll do our Big Ten tournament pregame, whoever they face. We'll know that later, obviously in a couple days. And this show's going to go on the road. So I will be in Chicago and watching the games. And so just so you know, the distance to the United Center to getting to a place to record is not going to be good. I'm not press, so I can't take my stuff with me. I can't do it at the game. So there'll be some sort of delay getting all the stuff out, but I will do my best because you guys do so much to help us out. So I will do my best to get all this stuff going. Any final words about the game besides that?
No, I mean, overall, I think if the bottom line is get a win, right? Yep. It's Al Davis.
Absolutely.
And that's what they did. And so the other thing too, I guess I would finish on is for all the complaining and whining and crying about this team. And I've heard this said many, many times, far too many times, enough to last me a lifetime. Tom Izzo's a 500 program the last 3 years.
Yeah.
This team, for all intents and purposes, is a 12-8 basketball team. In a Big Ten, there was as balanced as I've ever seen it. Very easily could have been, and you might be able to make an argument, should have been better than that. Not just in terms of games like the Iowa game. I can think about the Illinois game in Champaign, the Michigan game in Ann Arbor, all games that were right there, Northwestern at home, all games that were right there to win. But remember how many of those games they had to play without Malik Hall.
Yeah.
And yet here they are in a position where if they had played that game against Minnesota, wherever they would have fell in the Big Ten for Big Ten tournament purposes in terms of the tiebreakers, they would have tied for second in the conference. That's not a 500 season. It's not. This team has not been perfect. They have not been one of the great Michigan State teams by any means, but this is at this stage, and we are sitting here talking on, what is it, Saturday the 4th or the 5th? 4th.
4th, yeah.
This is a pretty good basketball team right now, in my opinion. And it's a team that I think, we'll see what the matchups are when they get the draw. We'll see what they do in the Big Ten tournament, all that. But I'm with Izzo, man. I don't see any reason to not have a level of optimism about what they can do.
Yep, totally agree. Yeah, this is a team that you watching the shooting right now. You're watching the offense sort of hum, and you think, they get a little bit more transition because now everybody's healthy. They can run a little bit more than they could before, and then you tighten up that defense a tiny bit. This is potentially a really dangerous team. I mean, that you definitely see the makings and the components for a team that can really make a run. The last couple of years, you're like, this is a team that could maybe make it into the tournament and maybe could do a little bit of damage. But this is a kind of team you're like, it's not crazy to envision some serious wins stringing it together here.
They have one element that if it's clicking, their ability from the perimeter, that we've seen this many, many times over the years, not with Michigan State as much, but I mean with other teams, other programs. If you happen to just be rolling in terms of your shooting, that can make up for some other sins. Now, I don't want it to have to get to that because it's a far less reliable equation. If you give me that plus to the way they defended for most of the season and solid defensive rebounding, then I'll take my chances with anybody. But they have that one strength that is an important strength, really important.
All right, well, we'll get out of here, and I'd say until next time, the Final Four is not on the schedule, but I guess this time for me, it is on the schedule. And if you want to watch the video, I will post it. It'll be on our YouTube channel. If you've not yet subscribed to it, head on over to youtube.com/@TFFINOTS, I believe. You can find it there. You can find videos of my tremendous. And this time I didn't airball any, I'm pretty sure, although I was shooting real fast. So I'm not going to be as embarrassed by the performance this time.
Good stuff.
Coach Garland actually said I looked okay out there, which I take that as a huge compliment.
Hey, wow.
Okay. So, I mean, you compare my first round versus my third round. You can definitely see I was actually practicing. So it's nice to actually see results, even though, ultimately I won. So good for me. Check out Brothers That Just Do Gutters. If you need gutter work in West Side of the State, go on to Nudge Printing. You can get some great Spartan gear there as well. And so until next time, the Final Four is not on the schedule. Go green.